There have been some ridiculous promises made by all three major parties, and today we'll go over 7 of them. If you care about housing affordability and your money, you'll care about this video. Henrick Mathieu here, the Ottawa Frenchman, and I want to start by saying that this video is not about preferences for a party or another. Even though I have my own beliefs, this will be a non-biased review of the 7 worst promises made by all three parties regarding real estate. I am very passionate about politics, but I'll keep my cool for this. Okay, you have to understand that politicians would say anything to get elected, and that includes making promises by pulling on your heartstrings, whether it makes sense or not. But some measures that they're talking about implementing would have the opposite effect that what's intended. And in the end, we are the ones suffering. This is a turning point in our country, so by all means, please go and vote. So I'll explain why those policies don't make sense and their real outcome. And we start the show with the Liberal Party. So number 1, we have reducing CMHC premiums. Now we could argue that the CMHC could use a revamp of how they operate, but basically they protect the insurance companies, so in the event of a housing collapse, they would be able to maintain housing in Canada. They base the price of premiums off what the insurance companies would have to pay out in the event of some catastrophic event. By reducing the premiums by 25%, there is no way that they would be able to withstand a crash. So this promise is purely designed to make people happy by saving them a little bit of money, but by doing so, they would be putting the whole real estate market at risk. So, no good. Bad idea number 2. And probably the most impactful if we're talking about social classes, more tax on investors. Now I know that most of you are picturing big corporations, multimillionaires when I say investors, but reality is that real estate is one of the last places where the average Joe can make money. Real estate alone is responsible for creating 90% of millionaires. Literally anyone can become a real estate investor, and they should, at least to some extent. But again, Liberals' first solution is more taxes. The real estate investors are a big economic force. They supply the housing market and they provide rental properties. By surtaxing them, you disincentivize them and hurt the supply. Low supply leads to higher prices and end up having the opposite effect of what's intended. If we look at this from an economical standpoint, it's nonsense. We also should not give up the last stronghold we got to make lower classes richer. Ridiculous measure number 3, and yes, it's again from the Liberals, the rent-to-own program. The way rent-to-own works is that you lease the place that you would like to buy while the investor accepts a smaller rent, so you can save some money for down payment. The goal being that after a 5-year term, you could ultimately afford the property and buy it back from the landlord. And here's a few reasons why this wouldn't work. Good luck trying to find an investor that would accept to reduce their income in order to sell a property. If you ask them to make less money on purpose, chances are they will put their money somewhere else, like the stock market, for example. Second, rent-to-own sounds very good, but in actuality, it very rarely works, especially in a market where the average sales price increased quickly like in Ottawa. Rent-to-own has been used by investors to trick people into paying higher rent in the hope that they would be able to realize their dream of homeownership. And bad policy number 4, again from the Liberal Party, banning foreign ownership. Now people are looking at Vancouver and Toronto and are thinking that the price increase are caused by foreign ownership. It's simply not true. They're a tiny drop in the bucket. Banning them would have a few unintended consequences that makes it simply impossible to stand behind. The only thing that makes a little sense in this is the Conservatives wanting to encourage foreign ownership in rental properties and purpose-built rental properties. But otherwise, we are just reducing the influx of foreign money in our economy. Can you imagine a business saying, you know what, we will not accept money from certain customers because we think it might help the other customers? This is not a good business model for either a business or a government. Okay, we are done with the Liberals. Now moving on to the Conservative for policy number 5. They want to promote 7 to 10 years mortgages. So this is just a general bad idea. In 2010, the market was picking up after the crash of 2007, and a lot of people wanted to play it super safe, so they got 10 years fixed mortgages. Those mortgages had higher rates, but they didn't want to risk another drastic rise in rates. Now 5 years later, the rates still hadn't gone up, and they were losing so much money on those mortgages that most of them switched back to a variable mortgage. That higher rate on a few $100,000 is an extra $20, $30, $40, even $50,000 in interest. I don't know many lenders that promote anything over 5-year fixed nowadays. When the rates are so low for so long, the economy becomes very sensitive to a rate change, so the Bank of Canada has to be very careful not to raise it too quickly. So to see a substantial shift in rates, it would take at least 5 to 10 years, and that gives you enough time to react accordingly. Bad policy number 6. Again, from the conservative, they want to change the stress test for small businesses and people working on commission. Now, I am working on commission, and this doesn't even make sense for me. They claim that we are at the disadvantage when it comes down to the stress test. Although having a variable income does make it a little harder, the stress test is for everyone, equally across the board, and it has to function to protect the market from crashes. That smells like vote buying, and we don't want it. Okay, moving on to the last bad idea, and this one's from the NDP, and this is probably the worst on this list, bringing back the 30 years amortization period. It was reduced to 25 years in 2012 for a good reason. Now they're probably thinking, ooh, 30 years to pay will make the payments lower. Well, think again. We learned this over the past 18 months. When interest rates and payment get lower, people buy more houses and bigger houses. And as a result, house prices went up. By doing this, they would put the Canadians in a market where prices are increasing even more, and the policy would have the exact opposite effect that what the NDP is suggesting. People would have the same payments but substantially more debt. We saw in recent years the dream of ownership fade away for a lot of people, so that's why this election is very important. Like I said, real estate is probably the last hope that most of us have to be financially free, and we need to protect it. All three parties are acknowledging that supply is probably the biggest problem, and that's a good thing. Not to state the obvious, but we can see a trend with 4 of the worst ideas being from the Liberals. I suggest that you learn all that you can about all the parties' platform, because there is much more to it than that. But at least, hopefully, the housing part is covered. By all means, the election is around the corner, so please don't hesitate to share this video. And while you had it, you can hit the like button and subscribe right there. I post regularly, and that shows me that you are indeed learning something. And I'm also a realtor in Ottawa, so if you need help finding a home or selling your home, send me an email so we can get this conversation going. Thank you for watching, everyone. If you want more content like this, I suggest you click on one of those 2 videos. It's all pretty good. Otherwise, see you on my channel and see you next week.